It's slightly rainy outside. It's getting cooler. That means soup. Well, for me, that means soup. So it is a simple squash soup today. It is the most pared down, I think, squash soup you can have, and that's what I love about squash. It's so easy, it's versatile, you can use it in anything, and soup goes together in like a matter of minutes and doesn't take long to cook, and it's a delicious, filling, but also just cozy supper. So I have my onion already chopped. I'm gonna just take this over and put it right into some melted butter on the stove in my stock pot. I like butter because it instantly adds just a little bit more of a, not a creamy flavor, but just kind of this warm flavor. So I'm putting that right in there. I'm gonna just stir it a little bit here, just around. I like to saute the onion first because it softens it. It adds a little bit more flavor before we just dump everything else in. Right on top of that, I'm just gonna put a little bit of salt. That actually helps break down the onion a little bit quicker, and it sautés a little bit quicker when you do that because it draws out the extra liquid in the onion. So I'm gonna let that saute a little bit. And while that is doing its magic, I'm gonna come over here and work on the squash. You can use any squash you want. I am using kabocha or kabocha and butternut. It's my two favorite squash. Butternut is the classic. You can use it in place of pumpkin. It is just delicious. It's just kind of that all-purpose squash. This is too, but it's gonna have just a little bit drier texture, which I like. And it has just a more kind of like meaty hardiness to it. I peeled them. As you can see, they look somewhat similar. This one's a little bit darker. And I'm just gonna chop them into kind of just like a large dice. Since this is all gonna cook together, and then after it cooks, we're gonna puree it. You don't have to worry too much about the dicing. You don't have to be too precise. That's kind of what I love about squash soup. It's kind of just like that simple, just go with it, throw things in. And that's also what I should admit I love about it is there are so many variations. On my website, wiseguy.com, I have a lot of different squash soups actually on there. There's ones for the slow cooker. There's ones with chipotle, so it has a little bit more of like a spicy note to it. And I love that. So if you're in the mood for something else, you can totally do a different type, but this is kind of just like the simple basic one to start with. And then from here, the sky's the limit. I'm gonna finish cutting this up and then we'll just add it to the pot. So to finish all this up, I have the squash done, but now I'm chopping up 2 apples. As you can see, I'm leaving the peel on. This is a blended soup, so you do not have to worry about that peel, especially on the apple. The squash, it can be a little bit harder peel. When I roast it, the butternut, I actually eat the peel, but I finish up 2 apples. The apples just lend and kind of bring out the sweetness of the squash, and their flavor just kind of brings in that autumn tone. It's really good. So everything here is cut. Now I'm gonna come over to my onion. It's been sauteing, has just a little color, and I'm gonna add some spices to it. So to this, I'm adding some cinnamon. To me, that is classic. If you are going to do kind of a squash soup, you want some cinnamon. Then a little bit of curry powder. Curry, I think to me, it's kind of classic. You don't want to overpower it, but a little bit of curry, especially when you mix it with the cinnamon, which honestly, a lot of other cultures use cinnamon in a savory way. So it's really important to kind of mix those in. When they're together, instantly, it just smells amazing. And then just a hint of nutmeg. I don't do a lot of nutmeg, but again, it brings in that fall flavor, and I love to use it in like the savory application. So I'm stirring those spices in. Spices a lot of times can actually what they call bloom when they are in a fat, which is the butter here, and it actually brings their flavor out even better. So that's why I'm adding them before I add everything else. So just a few seconds, stirring it around, you instantly get that smell, and so you know they're kind of activated. I love that. And we're just gonna start adding all this prepared squash and apples. I think this is like the perfect soup because look how simple this was. 5 minutes, and I'm putting the main ingredient in there. The apples are just as important, but they kind of take a back seat to all that squash. Whoops, we're putting all those right in there, even the ones that I dropped. And then what we're gonna add is some stock. I use home canned chicken stock often. Obviously, just use some bottom, that's completely fine. I'm gonna turn it up because I want it to come to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, I'm gonna put the lid on, turn it to a simmer, and just let it cook. You just have this autumn goodness in your house, and that's what I love about a soup. That cozy day, the warm vibes going in your house. It's what we all dream of. So I'm gonna have this come up, show it, put the lid on, you'll love it. You don't need to stir it, but I'm just doing this so you can see. It's come to a boil, it's a rolling boil, because when I stir it, it still boils. Obviously now, I'm just gonna turn it down to a simmer. Just a nice, gentle simmer. I'm gonna put that lid on just slightly askew, just to let some of that steam escape. And now we're just gonna enjoy the smell, enjoy the aroma, let it cook. Then we're gonna have dinner. And I'm gonna throw one surprise in there for you, because it can't be that easy, right? The soup has been simmering for a while. It's getting close to done, but to finish it up, you know, you can't just have soup. Well, you totally could, I do all the time, but I like a little bit of topping sometimes, so I just have some pumpkin seeds here, or pepitas. I'm gonna put a little bit of oil on top of them. This is really simple just to do at home. It's not a lot of work. It's really simple, it's quick. I'm gonna put some salt on them, because you need that good salty just hit when you have them, and then just a little bit of cinnamon. You could also do the curry. I just like to do kind of mirror. It's called mirroring, because those flavors are in the soup, so we're just kind of putting them together. And we're gonna mirror them on top of the soup, kind of like a garnish. So I just toss that around, spread them out. You kind of want them in an even layer. You don't want them to be just on top of each other, because then they won't roast evenly. I'm gonna pop these into the oven, let them roast as the soup finishes up, and then it'll all be ready together. This has simmered away. It smells good. It's so simple. We're gonna take the lid off. Obviously right now it is nothing to look at. It's not pretty. It's not really comforting when it looks like this. So we're gonna blend it. Oftentimes squash soups are blended because they're just better. The texture's better. You don't really want all those necessarily different pieces of apple, squash. So I'm gonna just use an immersion blender. You can use a high power blender too. Okay, when it's completely blended, and we do this off the heat, because if you blend something on the heat, it could either start to sputter, could start to get back on you worse. It's just always pull it off the heat, even if you do it on your stove. Now, I like to add a little bit of a creaminess factor. It could be regular milk, it could be an alternative milk. I like to actually put a little bit of coconut milk in there. And you can kind of just do it to what the preference, whatever you like. Blend it in, and then taste it. It's all kind of about what you want and what your factor is. And so at the end, I always think it's important to taste a little bit just to see if you need to adjust the salt, adjust anything else in there. Oh, that's perfect. A cream or a milk at the end just kind of balances it all out. So since that's done, I'm gonna actually get those pepitas out of the stove or the oven. I always mix up those words. They've roasted. They too smell really good. I'm just gonna set them down. Set this over there. You kind of get that roasted flavor, a little bit of that cinnamon. It just has that nice, just warm smell, and I love that. So I really should just make a bowl up. I grabbed a bowl. Look at that, it's velvety smooth. It has that rich color. You can't, guys, you cannot get more autumn than this. And what's fun is, even if you don't add milk directly to it, if you want, you can just put a little bit of this on top of it. Just kind of adds a little bit of a, again, it's just kind of like a garnish. It just kind of adds a little bit, and it adds a softness to the soup, which I like. And then just a few of these pepitas. They're still hot, so I'm not gonna hurt myself. And guys, this is literally what I crave during the autumn when I come in from mowing and it's cold or working outside. It's delicious. It's just like autumn in a bowl. You get the sweetness from the squash, but also the apples, and then the creaminess a little bit from that milk, the crunchiness of the, those pumpkin seeds, finish it off at the end. I hope you make this. It is simple. You usually will have the ingredients on hand. If you're like me, you kind of just have like squash coming out your ears this time of year. So it's a great way to use it, enjoy it, share it around. I'm gonna sit here and have more. Check out the website for the recipe. Can't wait till we make more together.